Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Education regularly scheduled meeting. Has this meeting been properly noticed?
Yes, it has.
Can you please call the roll?
Harlan.
Here.
Eliason.
Here.
Evans.
Here.
Garner.
Here.
Herzog.
Here.
Olmsted.
Here.
Heschel.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, and tonight will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by two South Park Middle School students. Whenever you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we will enjoy a performance by the South Park Middle School Orchestra.
We are planning to play two pieces for you today. The first one is Pachelbel Canon, the one that everyone knows as the wedding song. You will see 7 different versions of the canon as the kids play. And then we'll end with Dragon Hunter, one of our favorite pieces.
Thank you so much for coming and playing for us tonight. All right, so as they're leaving, we'll go right into the administrative and board reports. The first is the board president's report. I don't have anything for tonight, so we'll go right into superintendent's report.
Well, good evening. The superintendent's good news report for the September 27th, 2017. First of all, a big thank you to Good Sports and to Oshkosh Dr. Pepper Snapple Group for a grant that was awarded to the school district, which has supplied over $45,000 worth of sports equipment to Oshkosh North and Oshkosh West high school physical education classes. Okay. It's also a huge thank you to everyone at New Life Community Church for their generous donation of school supplies to students and staff at the start of the school year. What a great welcome back for everyone at Jefferson. Communities at Oshkosh North High School, Communities 2 students celebrated Constitution and Citizenship Day by teaching the 5th District 5th grade students in 13 elementary schools about history on this day and the Constitution by showing their pride in the USA, and by showing their gratitude to our founding fathers for the freedom they secured for us. Webster Stanley Elementary kicked off their school year with a back-to-school carnival sponsored by their PTO. Students enjoyed a bouncy house, games, and face painting. Special thanks to the PTO volunteers and families at Shapiro STEM Academy. The students enjoyed book fair, which included line dancing, crafts, photo booth, ice cream, and books. Merrill Middle School staff is all aboard to help students in growing literacy after recently participating in the sail-themed escape room activity to kick off phase 2 of their school literacy goal. Staff divided into 8 groups and that were trapped in rooms requiring the use of literacy-focused clues to help them escape. Merrill Middle School students had 35 students participate in the Middle Extended Learning Time MELT program, which is possible through Community Learning Center grant. Thanks to all who made this program possible for the students. Lastly, we have the superintendent's calendar for the last 2-week period. And then we have a special occasion. We have a lot of reasons for thank yous, and could we ask Beth Wyman just come to the table? And we had planned this to have 2 of our board members who led the volunteering campaign, but I think they want to speak first before they join Beth at the table. But Beth would be far less lonely if we had 2 fellow board members present.
I'll start.
You're set?
And I'm going to try this without crying. I wanted to take a moment and to talk about Project Curb. I had kind of the same thought process as most other people who wanted to make an acknowledgement about it tonight. And I wanted to thank and show my appreciation. There are so many people that it's just amazing. The people, the volunteers, the businesses, the parents, the teachers, the staff, the kids, students, from all different aspects of the community helped out. But at the helm of it all was Beth Wyman. And as I've reflecting the past couple of days on what I was part of and what I witnessed, I wanted to, as my body's recovering from Saturday, holy cow, that was, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people in this room that are still recovering. I was having a difficult time coming up with the right words on, I didn't know how to put into words. There wasn't enough or efficient or sufficient words to describe the feelings I was having with the community, but mainly what I saw in Beth with what she did with this project. So I didn't know what I was going to write. I was still thinking about it. And then today, Beth, in Beth fashion, she sends out an email this morning with thanks and gratefulness to every single person that helped with this community. And the list was long, thanks to you. The list was very long, and she was thanking everyone in the list, and especially the volunteers and the parents who showed up that day and the students who helped that day. You're so humble, Beth, that every time somebody tries to give you gratitude, you reflect it off and give it to everybody that's standing with you, and you never take any yourself. So I wanted to make sure that I went through every single email in response today to that email, and there was tons of them. And I wanted to pinpoint every word that I would see 4, 5, 8, 10 times with all these emails. And this is what you are to our community. You are passionate, you have a vision, you inspire everyone, you're committed to our community, you're a believer in our community, you're full of energy and it's contagious, you're a true leader. That every single email that was responded to that just kept reiterating the same things. And my favorite one was that we were all a privilege to be part of your effort and your energy and your love. And I appreciate it. I'm so grateful for what you've done over and over and over with so many projects for our community. And you inspire me to be better and to do better and to give everything I can to go big or go home. So thank you, Beth.
Well, I had planned to say something a lot longer, but I'm about to cry, so I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter. But we always talk about the importance of that one person can make a difference. And you're that person, Beth. So, oh my gosh. So thank you for all that you did for our district. I mean, Beth assigned me to minor crisis management, which I didn't know what that meant. And so I got a phone call that I had to drop off paint at one school and pick up paint at another school. And so I got to see Franklin, Emmeline Cook, Roosevelt, South Park, and Smith in action. And going to each of those schools was amazing because every time I got out of the car, there was so much excitement and, oh, hey, Steph, do you have our paint? And people were just, the energy, I wish I could bottle it up and keep it forever because it was so special and it was so unique. And it was the greatest community event I've ever been part of. So thank you.
Yes.
Oh, I'm not good at this.
That, I could not think of a better way to say thank you to you than a dozen roses, and being able to say to you how much we appreciate. As I read the memo that we all read this morning, I could not help but reflect on how you've diffused all the thanks in the community to others,
Yeah.
when we have no better way of saying thank you to you for all of what you've done and the great caring that you demonstrate each and every day, not just with this massive project, but with the O4E work and the backing for 2 strategic plans, of which you've been the anchor, the rock, and helping me, working with the board and the community to make a success of the last 6 years. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a brief video for all of us to enjoy, and we're set to go, I believe.
are no words other than thank you. Thank you for letting me just kind of run. There's some people that are very happy that this is done and happy to see me go, but besides that, it truly was a remarkable day, and you have a remarkable district, and now the community knows that as well. So thank you all very much. There were so many people that helped. This is wonderful, but you can thank yourselves and thank all the citizens in Oshkosh because it's a pretty cool place to live.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You know, from the beginning of this project, Beth, you repeatedly talked about how important it was that the outside of our schools reflect what went on inside, and that really resonated with me. And I'm not as eloquent as my two colleagues here are tonight, but I could sum this project up in 5 words based on your input. Outside pride reflects success inside. And now we've matched those two entities, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
Beth.
Have a good budget workshop.
Oh. Okay, where are we? District Administrator supplemental reports, if any. Okay, we don't have any of those. So we're up to committee chairs. Do any of the, yep, Barb.
Policy and governance, this is, this is not nearly as exciting.
I
as
know,
what
right?
we've all-
I'm like, well,
Hard to
right.
transition.
Policy and governance met on September 21st at 10 a.m. We had a number of agenda items to address. Julie Conrad had brought to the attention of the committee that there were changes needed in the policy 5451.01, Wisconsin Academic Excellence Scholarship, that were made to align the policy to the administrative guideline. In the event of a tie, a random drawing of student names will be used instead of a coin flip. And that was largely because we often have multiple students who would qualify, and a coin flip doesn't work if you have more than 2 students who tie. The change is in keeping with current practice and given the number of ties that have occurred in the last few graduating classes. So the committee approved the update to the policy and recommended that it come to the full board for tonight's meeting and approval. We also reviewed 22 policies that included the word committee for language updates. At the August Policy and Governance Committee meeting, Attorney Jim Macy had addressed the committee about the background and as a result of a recent Appleton School District case regarding violations of the Open Meetings Law. He made a few recommendations for the district in order to maintain compliance, which included reviewing all policies containing the word committee to determine if the following language needed to be added. This is a quote. "Nothing in this policy or other policies of the board are intended to create any governmental body of the district unless such intent is expressly set forth by written board policy or a specific vote of the board. As such, nothing in this policy is intended to be a rule or order of the board creating a governmental body for matters involving administrative meetings within the district," end of quote. So after reviewing 22 policies, there were 2 policies that were updated with this language. Policy 0155 on committees and policy 0155.1 standing board committees and appointments. We also reviewed another 12 policies that needed name updates and clerical changes. These policies either had name and email updates as well as a variety of clerical changes, including capitalization, clarification, where the word superintendent or district administrator and district administrator were used interchangeably, and we went with the standard superintendent. And then general cleanup, removing the phrase of education from Board of Education, since we wanted to simplify the language. Meeting was adjourned at 10:56 a.m. and the committee will meet again on October 19th at 10 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Kelly?
The Facility and Finance Committee met and on September 21st at 8:30 in the room. They came with the budget variance report for the 2016, which is a written report. Sue Schnorr shared a report with the committee showing how the district ended in 2016-17 with the $768,000 surplus. There should be no more adjustments. Some of the major reasons for the surplus included the E-rate revenue due to the wireless updates in the district, salary and benefits under budgeted by $700,000, or a 1 point in variance, 1 point percentage. And the track project, which was not finished in 2016-17, so $500,000 will come out of 2017-18 for the remaining track expenditures. There will be a request for the viable plan on how technology wants to use the E-rate revenue for the future. Budget update. There will be a workshop on the budget on tonight's board meeting. The budget was looking favorable. However, there has been talk of the governor vetoing the low spending provision. This will have a significant impact on the budget over the next 5 years, and I know some of that is coming now. Beth Wyman was at our meeting. She presented a proposal to the community regarding a potential donation, which this doesn't stop with her, a donation of $50,000 for school signage. The caveat is to see consistency in branding of all the school districts with regarding their school signs. Beth shared examples of how the signs would look. Any school signs name replacement in the future would use the same model, so there's consistency. Schools could add individuality to each of their school by putting their colors on the school, or putting their mascot on, or their color on the sign and their mascot on that sign. Currently, signs at Jefferson, Roosevelt, Reed, Shapiro, Tipler, Elps, and Oakwood would be replaced. The district would be responsible for the wiring because these would have lights on them. The committee agreed to accept the donation and proceed with the signs. The next step will be determine placement, and then once decided, there will be need to do some underground electrical work. The signs would be implemented before winter. Beth will contact the donor to inform them to move forward. And there's low maintenance on these, and the cost, they're LED lighting, so the cost is very minimal for having those also. Also, Brad Judarski was here to give us an update on the Oshkosh West Marquee sign. He reported that it will be in place very soon. There's already 1 or 2 poles up there already. The sign is located just off of Taft, across from the Pollock Pool. The vendor has put a pole in the ground. We'll finish installation next Wednesday and get an electrician in and run power to the pole. So that would have happened today. The date will be scheduled for training of 2 high school contacts and recreation department contact, so that they can program the sign from anywhere in the district or home, they said, or any office too. The sign will dim itself as daylight drops, so there should be no lighting issues within the neighborhood. The project is being completed without using any tax dollars. This was funded mainly by a $40,000 donation from the Alberta Kimball Foundation. The cost of the sign was $43,000. It was noted that the Wildcat Cafe stepped forward to address the added cost and provided them the missing funding for that. They donated to that same cause. There's a remaining cost for the curbing, the landscaping, electrical work, which will be done this fall. Maintenance workers will remove all the old signage from around west, the other 2 signs. The project has been a conceptual dream for 5 to 6 years, so it is very exciting to have it finally finished. Once complete, the total project cost is about $50,000. There will be a donation on the sign recognizing the Alberta Kimball Foundation and the Wildcat Cafe. Jim Fox gave us an update on our summer projects. There were $3.5 million worth of projects that included administration, Emmeline Cook, Oakwood, Reed, South Park, Tipler, and West, as well as replacement of district-wide roof sections. The projects went very well and were finished all on time. There was unanticipated asbestos found in Tipler, which resulted in an additional $50,000 cost. They got that all cleaned up. The only outstanding area is the South Park pool. The fire devices were installed last week, and once the fire inspection passes, the fire marshal has to come in, then the kids and the staff are allowed in that area, and they are very excited to use it. Because of the generous donation we got for the Oshkosh West weightlifting room, they have donated a lot of their weightlifting machines to South Park to have they're using part of this as a weightlifting room. They're just waiting because Mrs. McLaughlin had ordered for extra, because you have to have extra floor underneath that for padding, for that stuff. She's just waiting on that floor for that stuff to be put over there too. So they're really excited. We also had a discussion about available options to increase parking at Merrill with all the street parking. And then there's that parking lot way down on the road that's gravel. And so we discussed some options on that. Future agenda items is there was a suggestion that a plan be in use for the additional technology money. What are they not able to do? What are they not able to do that this money would allow them to do? So we're just looking for a general overview of technology has some surplus and what they plan on using that money for. The meeting was adjourned at 9:22, and the next meeting is scheduled for October 19th at 8:30 a.m.
Thank you. Any other committee chairs? Okay. All right.
May I just interject, for the benefit of the full board, we were trying to schedule Jim Fox to present kind of a visual update of all of the facilities at our next workshop meeting, which is the first meeting in October.
Oh, okay.
And that way the full board and the community will be able to kind of have a visual impact of all the continued projects. And we're fortunate
That's a
also
great
that
idea.
we are at this stage with that because the governor took action to bring an ad to veto continuation of this project for what is cynically referred to in changing the letters 1,000 years. So
Yeah.
that it was for 3018. I'm sure legislature will take action otherwise at some point in time before then.
Right.
Okay. All right, so on to non-agenda related public forum. Is there anybody here that would like to speak? Please give us your name and your address.
Good evening, Board. Matt Mickelson. I live at 906 Winnebago. I have a 8th grader at Webster Stanley Middle School. I'm here tonight to raise a concern that from an experience that we had last year, 7th grade, at the end of the school year. Pretty deep into the final semester, I finally figured out or finally took the action to step up and get onto the Infinite campus and found out that my son was failing math. This was because he took his foot off the pedal and I wasn't watching Infinite campus. My concern with this, fortunately we went through some steps and some motions of dealing with this, and he was able to elevate his grade to a D by the end of the year. We prompted him to get back into working mode, and so that turned out not as good as we wanted, but better than an F. My concern was that I never received a phone call or an email or a letter home or anything in the mail from the school, period. I spoke with Principal Marshall about this and was told, well, you should have been on Infinite campus. Yes, absolutely, understand that. Had a meeting with Stan Mack and Principal Phillips about this, and same thing, was told, you know, Infinite campus is the route for this. And gosh, I miss paper report cards coming home where I had to sign off on things, and was told that, you know, a very large majority, I believe it was 90+% of parents are dialed into Infinite campus. I've asked around over the last several months and had varying different answers of how much they spend on Infinite campus. In the world where there's so much happening to run your life, it's hard to stay on top of it. Truthfully, I should have been on top of Tyler to make sure that he was doing his schoolwork. Truthfully, Tyler should have had his foot planted deeply into that gas pedal to make sure that he was getting his work done. Once I figured that out, that turned around quickly. My concern is about not receiving any kind of communication for something that fell through the cracks, and how come it wasn't addressed to me, you know, hopefully sooner, to raise that grade up. And the grade's not really my concern. I could almost care less about the grade, but how much work, how much knowledge did he miss along the ways there? That's the major concern that I have with this. I was pleased to find out today, after having a discussion with the Dean of Students on a different matter, that there has been a policy put in place. I don't know if, Stan, you were a part of that, but it sounds like we're taking steps in the right direction. Stan, can you expand on that briefly?
As a result of the issues you did raise, we did establish with the school and with a reminder to our principals to double check where there are missing parents are not subscribing to Infinite Campus, that we develop a system that we can clarify and make sure that there's alternative communication home for those who are not picking up Infinite Campus. And once again, as we also had recently the experience with the bomb threat at West, we discovered a number of parents also who are not subscribed to. That prompted them. Each building secretary is in a position to assist parents in making sure whether they use it on a daily basis or not, but to encourage use of Infinite Campus, and also to monitor those students whose families are either choosing not to or do not have electronic access for that communication, that we make sure that teachers are alerted to that.
When I was growing up, coming up, through the 80s, my parents were involved directly with their teachers. Maybe not teachers, maybe that's not the right word, but in 8th grade, they were involved in the school. They were a known quantity. We've been at events at Webster. The teachers know who we are. We've chaperoned on ski trips. We're a known quantity in the office. The Mickelsons are known in Webster Stanley. My older son went there for middle school. More so than the policies, which it sounds like it took a step in the right direction there. Thank you. I was unsatisfied with being told, stay with Infinite Campus. I'm a person-to-person relationship guy. I hate texts. I use texts, but if I'm going to go back and forth with somebody more than 3 times, I'll pick up the phone, or require them to pick up the phone. Call me, or let's sit down, let's have coffee, and do it face to face. I just miss those times when we used to do that more.
Can I interrupt you? Just in the interest of time, we usually like to. Could you just share with us?
I'm almost done.
It's okay. Yeah, just share with us what you want the board to do, so that we can help you.
I'll get there.
Okay.
I'm almost done here.
Okay.
Fine. Specifically, good. I would like to see less emphasis taken off of Infinite Campus and put further on building relationships. And if that's calling parents, that's it. I mean, if that's having more events at school, pulling somebody aside, perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate you coming in. I personally really like to hear from the community, and I'll definitely, if I agree with you, and I apologize that happened, and I thank you for bringing that forward so that we can bring new policies and get that straightened out.
As a parent, I'm disappointed that I'm the only one here tonight. I'm glad that there was some agenda items. I would have not liked being second fiddle to Mrs. Weinman behind that, so. Good evening.
Thanks.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, the next item is agenda-related public forum. Seeing none, we'll move right into workshops. Number 1, presentation of the 17-18 preliminary budget with Sue Schnorr.
I was hoping the orchestra would be playing in the
Yes,
background
that
while I
would
was
be
doing my presentation, but I couldn't get that.
And as Sue was preparing this, we dreamed of a number of songs that would be apropos for a budget presentation, but none of them seemed appropriate for tonight.
After a conversation I had this afternoon with Bob, I thought I'd add a slide that talks about the budget adoption process. And this is right off the DPI webpage. The statute 6590 is the statute that talks about the adoption of budgets and budget adoption. And DPI basically wraps it up into 4 steps. You create a budget, you publish the budget, you hold a public hearing on that budget, and then the school board adopts the budget and sets the tax levy. Now, there's nothing in statute that says you have to do it in that order. I've worked for 5 different school districts, and some do the budget before the public hearing, so that way you have an approved budget to take to the budget hearing. Other districts do it after the budget hearing. There's nothing in statute that even though DPI put this on our webpage as an aid to school districts, there's nothing that says you have to do it that way. The reason that it has to be on the agenda for tonight is we're short-term borrowing next week, and the lending institution would not borrow us the $13 million without a budget in place. So that's why it had to be before we could short-term borrow. Otherwise, we don't technically have to set a budget until the board adopts the tax levy the last meeting in October. That is the only thing that's kind of etched in stone, is that along with approving the tax levy, the board has to have an adopted budget. Otherwise, there's no real statutory requirement as to when the board has to approve a budget. So for our purposes, it's on the agenda tonight, simply so that we can short-term borrow next week. It's kind of the reason for the timing. Just an overview of some of the major revenues. The proposed low revenue ceiling, which we thought was a great thing for school districts, was vetoed by the governor. That's $423,000 for us as a school district this first year, and over $900,000 a year for the next 5 years. So that would have really been a huge boost to our district and our budget, which is now gone. So hopefully, I know there's some rumblings of a veto override, but I don't know at the moment where that stands or where that's going. So that's kind of up in the air right now.
We did have an update, at the WASB regional meeting last night regarding that. According to Dan Rossmiller, who's one of the government relations staff members at WASB, that the override would have to begin in the assembly. And even if it did pass the assembly, who knows if it would be passed in the Senate. So he wasn't sure either where that would be. So as you've said, things are up in the air, but that was his latest take on a possible override.
So it's a little frustrating, to say the least. But there is that increase in per pupil aid of $200, and that's $1.8 million for us. The frustrating part about that per pupil aid is Wisconsin was always based on an equalization aid formula, which meant that districts that were poorer in property got more state aid than districts that were wealthy in property. Because if you have a lot of property wealth, you have the capacity to tax more. So we get what's called equalization aid. And the whole purpose behind that aid is to equalize districts that have high property wealth versus districts that have low property wealth. If you have a lot of property wealth, like in Door County or in lake frontage, you have the capacity to tax more than a district that has low property wealth and property value. And so the whole purpose of equalization aid is to equal that out. This per pupil aid that's been implemented over the last couple of years, and we now get over $450 per pupil, every district across the board gets that. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're a high spender, whether you're a low spender, every district across the board gets that same per pupil aid. So I'll end my editorial there.
It does not help us with the catch-up.
No, it does not. Then there's a property tax chargeback. That's the other I just tried to highlight major revenue changes in here. Whenever a business defaults on their taxes, the county can charge back districts for that, and then in the subsequent year, we can re-tax it. And so we happen to have a lot of those chargebacks last year, so that was an increase in our budget. And there's always grant revenue changes. That fluctuates. As you know, there's a possible Title I decrease next year. So grant revenue varies every year, too. Excuse me. On the expenditure side, the CPI was 1.26, so this includes a 1.26 for all employees. It also includes movement on the salary schedule. All of our employees are covered by a salary matrix or salary schedule, and based on where they're at in that schedule, they also get an increment on that schedule. We also budgeted an 8% health insurance increase, which I'm really glad to report. We only are getting a 3% which is phenomenal. That is about $402,000. So as you'll see in a future slide, we do have a deficit that's bigger than I projected, but it actually will be down because of the health insurance increase. That's 5% lower than we have budgeted. And then obviously there's other benefit changes that if you're going to increase your salaries, things like FICA and the district share of Wisconsin retirement, all of that goes up with those salaries. We still have a small deficit from 16-17, about 125,000 that's built into this. We had a revenue limit decrease because I was projecting a stable student population, but we actually, it's good news, we actually grew. I'm sure we grew by more than 42 students, but from my standpoint, I look at resident students and full-time equivalency. So resident students, full-time equivalency grew by 42 students, which is 130,000 for our district. So that was really good news that, from an enrollment standpoint.
And before we leave this, we should comment on what didn't happen this week in Washington was also a savior that's buried into our revenue sources, anywhere from 700,000 to up to $1 million some years. The Medicaid cuts that could have occurred had 50 votes occurred in the U.S. Senate. It's nice to celebrate what didn't get cut. Because that action of 50 votes before September 30th could have resulted in additional revenue cuts because we collect Medicaid on the additional assistance for our special education students, and it depends upon which year, what our student needs are, but it can range anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million a year, and we did not lose that because it didn't get cut. So at least for this coming year.
So then we had some additions to the budget. That .5 math IST wasn't an actually addition of a person, but she was funded by a grant, which went away, so we had to find resources to fund her. We added a staff person at Traeger Middle, that was enrollment driven. Merrill Middle, which was enrollment driven. North added a Phi-Ed position, which was class load driven. And then we added 8 positions due to the new ABC schedule implementation, which you had a workshop on earlier this spring. And it's my understanding that implementation of that's gone very well, and that people are happy with that. That meant we had an adjusted deficit of just shy of 1.7 million. Then in May, this was the approved list of budget reductions that we did. Now, some of them couldn't happen just for a variety of reasons. Some of them, when we ended up looking at it, were like a couple of them were we used federal funds for. So even though we made the reduction, we used federal funds, so that's not really a cut. So even though we came up with $1.3 million worth of cuts, it didn't actually come out to quite that many. So when we actually ended up having the budget all done, we have a deficit of $538,000, whereas we thought we'd have a deficit of about $375,000. But in actuality, we are resolving that for 17-18. Most of that's resolved just because of the lower health insurance increase absorbs almost all of it, all but about 100,000 of that. But we also have some large carryover in some of our IDEA grant funds that really needs to be almost a use it or lose it kind of situation. So we are paying for some staff out of special ed IDEA funds that were district funds before.
And those are federal funds that we would lose if we didn't use them.
You can have so much carryover, but we have a greater carryover than what is allowed. So we are going to use those resources to pay for some staffing in 17-18, but then in 18-19, those people will go back on the district budget. So it's really only a 1-year solution, but it really does mean that between the health insurance savings and doing that budget transfer to use that budget carryover, we won't have a deficit in 17-18. But I didn't want to make all of those changes because we made them after we actually published the budget, and I wanted the budget that was presented this evening to match what was published. And so even at the budget hearing, the first meeting in October will be the budget with the deficit because I wanted everything to match. And then after we have the budget hearing, the board can approve some budget changes to incorporate all of those changes. and approve the tax levy the end of October. I think that's it.
Does anybody have any questions for Sue? Yes, Barb.
I don't really have a question, but I just wanted to thank Mrs. Schnorr for preparing this report. It's been a number of months since the board approved the budget reductions, and having the fuller picture now that we have a state budget in place and some of the implications of that budget on our own budget is very helpful. So thank you for your preparation.
Yeah, thank you, Barb, or Sue, because we did ask you if you would come and just give us a Reader's Digest update of. So
And I
thanks.
should have known to do that. I mean, I live and breathe it every day,
Yeah.
and it kind of got away from me that you haven't seen anything since May
Yeah.
10th, which
Yeah.
was a long time ago, but I forget that because I
You're
deal with
there
it every
all the
day.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you for taking my phone call this
No problem.
afternoon. I do appreciate it, and I think after looking at your presentation a lot more, I have a better understanding of what's all in here.
Okay, good.
And your additional slide that you put in, I think, is kind of a form of guidance for us in thinking about, this process and how do we want to go forward. Well, I called Sue this afternoon because I was struggling with how this process plays out, partially because of my past experiences as a city councilman. On the city council, they spend months with the public and months with the council, learning about all the departments every year that they pass the budget. And each department comes and makes a proposal, so to say, to that. And then in the end, it has to be open for public hearing for roughly 2 meetings. So a month's time. And I was really kind of not understanding where that type of process falls in within this type of process. And Sue basically explained it to me that it's kind of the process that we followed for the year, because it's not a set in stone process and such, and it's not necessarily a statutory process. It's a process that's set out by DPI and how we can do that. And so I guess my comments more are around, is there a type of set process that we want to follow for this in the future, knowing that we necessarily aren't going to make a decision on that today because that's not what's on the agenda. But I think it's an interesting discussion to have as a board of, do we want to kind of uniform this process so that it's a little bit more consistent in the eyes of the public. It's not, our previous person that spoke here, alluded to the important things that are on the budget, and wish that there was more people here. That's kind of my goal, is there a way that we can refine this process that can still instill the public to be involved and to garner more input ahead of the game instead of kind of after the game. And that's what I'm struggling with, is that we're going to be asked to adopt a preliminary budget tonight without any option of input from the community. And we're going back to that, and then possibly doing changes off of anything that we find based on changes at the state level or based on changes that we get from the community.
The other difference between us and a municipality is we don't have all the different departments and silos that a municipality has. We are in the business of educating kids, and for most part, that's all we do. And there's not as much flexibility. 80% of our budget is people, and
Yep.
and granted, you could have more or less people, but part of that's driven by class sizes. Part of that's driven by the number of buildings you have in this district. And so once you take out the fact that 80% is people, and unless you're going to close a building or increase class size or decrease class size, you really only have, and then you take that remaining 20% and you get rid of the big things like utilities and bus contract and a few other variables, you're down to maybe
IT.
5 to 8% that you actually have any
Any say
control
in.
of.
Yeah.
May I just answer also part of the question? In years where we have substantial anticipated deficits in each year, and we've done that twice with complete community and citizen input into our budget. As part of a budget reduction process that we then engaged and came to the board back in December. We asked board members to gather citizens. We had between citizens and staff some 34 to 45 people involved, and holding a whole series of budget discussions, of which Sue and Sue's predecessor went through presentations of the details of all the revenue side, all the expenditure side, and we worked through that entire process because we needed to have and bring to the board citizen community ownership in those substantial reductions that would impact direct instruction. What we did this year in the March, April, and May, we gathered a whole list of budget reductions that we made reductions without going to the public because we knew we could do those without them being painful or controversial. They're painful on our staff because we increased average class size to the maximum authorized by the board, but the other list we went through without needing to. We also publicized those reductions and reviewed and received no negative input on it. We also were at that same time trying to do an enhanced educational program by the ABC program being added, which was a counterbalance to, which was about 600,000 or so addition that we were counterbalancing. So we were expanding consistency of art, phy-ed, and music in buildings and becoming more efficient. So we went through that process. But in years where there is a serious deficit that far exceeding what we would look at, we have engaged the community. I would recommend that in the future as we deal with this present budget. We did not see we needed to do that because it was really non-controversial. We were continuing to deliver on the promise for class sizes, and we in fact were expanding the phy-ed offerings by one section per week. So each of those have been involved with the process. The reality is that we have citizens, every time we do this, walk away and say, we don't know how you did it, and it's such a painful process that we'd have to provide more than drinking water to recruit people, which is really all plus some candy treats that had people sit through 3 to 4 nights of sessions in February, of which February is so miserable, there's nothing better to do anyway than do that. But we're on that cycle. So it is a process that we have engaged when it was a large, massive reduction that would occur. But when there are small tinkering with the budget, and we had every reason to believe that at least the $1,900,000 or the $200 per student each year, had that not been on the table from the governor in February, we would have gone through the same process of needing to be in a place to deal with a budget reduction plan and then hold public input hearings through that. So we have done public input hearings through the process when it's significant adjustment, but when we're returning to all we've had, and returning to that and only becoming more efficient. We saved 6 elementary positions because we balanced by open enrollment. We did a number of things to become more efficient, and those are things that the public would have said, well, why don't you do those anyway? And so that part of the process. The system that we have used here in the school system is a common one that used in school districts and not a party to what municipal government does. And I have watched. I'm kind of a geek. I watch all of that on cable television, and and in the end, with a much smaller budget, the city, because of their process, spends so much to do about much smaller budgets than we have to deal with, of which, as Sue describes, 80% of it is tied up in our delivering and employing teachers, principals, paraprofessionals, and custodial folks to deal with it.
So, if I understand what you're asking for, would you like to have us consider that as a future agenda item? including the community in the budget process.
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
I think that's
So
an
when we get
important
to that,
item for us to have.
if you remember and I remember, then
Okay.
maybe we'll make it happen.
Right.
All right.
And I just have one comment. Thank you for bringing that up, because I do think that getting the community more involved in our budget and helping them understand what's going on and how, you know, we're subject to the governor's vetoes and the governor's budget, and it's a lot of it out of our control. I think the more that we can get our community involved, the better, because then when we do have to do things like go to referendum, if they're up to speed on what's going on already, then they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Sure. And Stan, I just, you gave off a litany of all the great things that the board has supported and that you have advised your staff and executive team to do a great job in. And my comments are not geared around what you haven't done. It's about what you have been doing, and it's about making it more transparent and more open to the community. And that's not to say that we're not doing that already. That happens in many different ways. And so, but I think it's just really important, because one of the things that I also hear from people is that how do we do all of this? And when I first called Sue, I hadn't looked at all the information either, so I'm being forthright on that. Because I was like, where are the line items? They're here.
Right.
They're a lot different than how I've seen them in the past. And so that's a learning curve. Same thing in the community, right? So they look at all that stuff. They can easily get confused on how a municipality works and how a school district does their stuff. So, and I think it's very open to create a consistent and historical process on how we communicate this to the public. That's what I'm looking for.
Good.
As part of the
Thank you.
budget hearing, we also do a budget book that I put together. And I'm currently working on revising that book to meet a national standard. So that, I mean, that might help too, that if we get some recognition for that. But it's also going to then be a tool that we can use to educate the public a little bit more, or make it available to the public about our budget.
Okay.
One
Now,
of-
I have to clarify, because Jim gave me a tisk here. The reason why I didn't see it right away is that I jumped right to the budget in the agenda, whereas I would thought all that information would have been, and that's what brought up the call, is that all the information that I thought would have been related to the budget wasn't there, it was in the presentation. So that's what confused me, so.
You get one pass.
Thanks.
That may have been it.
And frankly, one of the things that could be done, and we've had this discussion about how we handle committee meetings, that I think because we hold them at times board members can attend, but we don't always have them as being really customer-friendly things that during a particular budget development cycle, a couple of those meetings could be held as public meetings, as early evening meetings. And I know that unless, and this is the 45 years experience speaking, is that that unless somebody's going to lose something, it is not an attractive event. And that people don't come to do those, but you can make them more accessible as you're going through them. And the accumulation of those pieces are all set in order once we know enrollment projections, we know what established ratios are, and then we class size ratios, and the number of buildings we're operating. Interesting, another point of public hearings that would occur is required by law is that if we were to close a building, you need to have hearings that relate to closing the building. That you deal with those things, but that also is a reduction in expenditure, not an increase in expenditure.
What I think I hear you saying, Bob, is that you have observed different processes at the city council
Correct.
boardroom as compared to this one. And I'm not familiar with that one, to be honest with you. I know Sue does use a process. There's a it used to be a textbook, but I think they still sell a version of it at the Wisconsin Association of School Board and WASBO and WASDA conventions in in January. I'm sure you can find it online too. It used to be called something like the Wisconsin Budget Cycle.
Budget cycle, yep,
And-
they still
and
have
they're-
that in
they're
publication.
creative.
Yes, they do.
Been
Yes.
around a long time with lots of revisions, I'm sure. But that outlines some steps in terms of the process. And what I observed might be different this year as compared to past years is that oftentimes this kind of meeting is held in July. But under Wisconsin statute, the Wisconsin legislature is supposed to pass a budget by the end of June, which didn't happen. It happened last week, almost the end of September. So if we'd had that meeting in July, there would have been a lot more variables in the air that we wouldn't have known about and wouldn't have known the direct impact on this budget. But your comments about getting communication out, I think, is well founded. There are probably, I don't know, roughly 25% of the population who have children in school. So we could probably reach that population through newsletters
Or
and whatnot,
through
but the
Infinite
other
Campus.
75%, we cannot.
Much better than what we ever have, you know?
Yeah, so,
So-
but I think the communication, not only in the area of budgeting, but other things we do is really critical.
So,
Thank
I
you.
mean,
And I would ask, Sue, have you had a single call on the published budget?
No.
And I've had no call on the published
Sure.
budget.
But that doesn't mean that we
It
can't
doesn't
do a
mean
better
that it's
job.
not-
Right.
Right.
So
I
we can
mean,
talk about it.
We raised
We get
about.
questions about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Sue and I had the conversation about the noticing of the budget and the hearings and stuff like this, and, you know, how we're obligated to put it into paper print. Well, our local newspaper has a much limited print now, and we essentially have better tools that we could use
Yeah,
at
we
hand
should, yeah.
to communicate our budgets out to the people that it affects the most. And if it's just our families, that's great, but then we can think of and use other modes to communicate that information out. And to me, it's all about creating better communication, better understanding of how do we get to what we're taking votes on. And I just think that there's a better way that we can do that.
Yep.
you
Thank
know.
you.
And I think some of we're tied a little bit, but I think we can think outside of the box on that. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Are there any other questions for Sue? All right. Thank you so much, Sue. Appreciate it. Okay, so we'll move into the consent resolution agenda. For the consent agenda, the board has been furnished with background material on each item or has discussed it at a previous meeting. These will be acted upon with one vote without discussion. If a board member wants to discuss any item, it will be pulled out of the consent agenda and will be voted on separately. I was asked to pull 10B and 12. Is there anything else? All right, here we go. I always feel like an auctioneer. The board will consider approval of, 1, minutes of August 23rd, 2017, regular board meeting. 2, minutes of August 23rd, 2017, executive session, regular board meeting. 3, minutes of August 30th, 2017, executive session, special board meeting. 4, minutes of August 31st, 2017, executive session, special board meeting. 5, minutes of September 1, 2017, special board meeting. 6, minutes of September 13, 2017, regular board meeting. 7, minutes of September 13th, 2017, executive board session, regular board meeting. 8, minutes of September 18th, 2017, special board meeting. 9, bills payable. 10A, appointments, resignations, and salary schedule. And 11, 2017-18 preliminary budget.
So moved.
Second?
Please call the roll.
Peschel.
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Carlin.
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Eliason.
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Evans.
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner.
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog.
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted.
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Motion carried.
Okay, Resolution 10B. Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the retirements as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Mrs. Garner, I'd ask that this be pulled. We have another employee, Linda Schultz, early childhood integrated teacher assistant at Merrill Elementary School, who will be retiring from the district in October of this year. She has been employed with the district since 1989, and I just wanted to thank her for her service to the children of our district and to the parents represented by those children. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Carlin.
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Eliason.
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Evans.
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner.
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog.
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted.
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel.
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Motion carried.
Okay, resolution number 12. Be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve the policy revisions and updates as filed with the Secretary to the Board of Education. Do I have to read all these? Nuts. A, 5451.01 Wisconsin Academic Excellence Scholarship. B, 0155 committees. C, 0155.1 Standing Board Committees and Appointments. D, 5500 Student Code of Classroom Conduct. E, 6800 System of Accounting. F, 7430 Safety Standards. G, 9140 Citizens Advisory Committee. H, 1422 Non-Discrimination Equal Employment Opportunity. I, 1623 Section 504 ADA Prohibition Against Disability Discrimination in Employment. J, 1662 Employee Anti-Harassment. K, 2260 Non-Discrimination and Access to Equal Educational Opportunity. L, 2260.01 Section 504 ADA Prohibition Against Discrimination Based on Disability. M, 3122 Non-Discrimination and Equal Employment Opportunity. And 3123 Section 504 ADA Prohibition Against Discrimination in Employment. O, 3362 Employee Anti-Harassment. P, 4122 Non-Discrimination, Equal Employment Opportunity. Q, 4123 Section 504 ADA Prohibition Against Disability Discrimination in Employment. R, 4362 Employee Anti-Harassment. And S, 5517 Student Anti-Harassment.
So moved.
Second.
Please. Oh, discussion.
Mrs. Garner, I had asked that this be pulled in order to thank Sherry Wirtz for all of her work on these 36 policies that were reviewed by Policy and Governance. She had everything so well organized. It really helped the committee go through the process more smoothly without having to do a lot of digging. So I just wanted to publicly thank Sherry for her work on this particular agenda item.
Yes. Any other discussions? Okay, please call the roll.
Eliason.
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Evans.
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner.
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog.
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted.
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel.
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Carlin.
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Motion carried.
Okay, there's no individually considered resolutions, so the next is request for future agenda items. So we had one from Bob. Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, you can finish.
Well, I was gonna say what your request was, but why don't you say it?
Well, I guess my request is to define what type of budgeting process that we want to use. I'm gonna say minimally in the next year after this budget cycle. So, I mean, and that, I guess we can provide a resolution that kind of sets a timeline for that and what happens within that timeline.
Okay.
Or we can leave it open and have it as a discussion and create it in open session.
Okay.
So,
I thought you also wanted to look at how we communicate the various stages or steps of the budget.
and I think that's
part of the
part of
process?
that.
Okay.
It's looking at the budgeting, the budget process from the very beginning to the point that it would become adopted.
Okay.
What stages we would take that in and communicate that in.
Okay.
Might I suggest out of balance and fairness for Sue in finishing the last work, and
Mhm.
because the next two meetings will occupy parts of this year's budget process, that we would move that discussion to a meeting in November when we have completed everything into place to have this.
I honestly don't think that this is a topic that we have to discuss until next year, to be honest with you, just as long as we've kind of put something in stone, had a discussion about it by, sometime in the early spring,
Okay.
I think is
Yeah, well,
is appropriate.
We'd want to do that in November, December, because our budget cycle
Sure.
we start on our budget cycle for next year because of the July 1 fiscal year. We would want to deal with that from the very beginning.
I'm in here.
Yeah, beginning probably in November, December, because then it's too late if we're doing it in the spring.
No, I appreciate, Stan, you're always reminding me to think much further in advance than, than.
We're just a happy year off from the city, so, the city, but I would beg for Sue to have the opportunity to wrap things up for this fiscal year
Yes.
preparation.
Absolutely.
And, we're operating based on the lateness of the state, and we won't get, the information until the last days of October, for, the appropriate setting levy and, for the action that needs to take place at the second meeting of October. And, most other things are fair game after November 1.
Are there any other requests for future agenda items? Okey doke. Announcements. Okey dokey. I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted?
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel?
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Cullen?
Aye.
Cullen, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Motion carried.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.